Hello everybody, welcome to the second edition of the International Webinar Series. Today we will be talking about studying at Cambridge, so a nice overview of the different elements of studying at the university. So my name is Amy and I work in the international team at the Cambridge Admissions Office. So I'll be hosting the webinar today, but I am joined by two international students and I'll just pass over to them to introduce themselves.
Right.
Hin will come to you first. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm Hin, and I'm a fourth-year student studying natural sciences, and especially in particular biochemistry. And I'm also studying in Churchill College.
Hi, I'm Madeline, and I'm in my second year. I'm at Girton College, and I study social anthropology and religious studies.
Perfect. Thank you both for joining us today. So we'll make a start. In the presentation, we will cover a little bit about the courses at Cambridge. We'll also cover how you're taught, so the different teaching methods that we have available for students. We'll talk a little bit about the facilities and the resources at the university. We'll also talk about a typical workload, and our students will talk us through a typical day in the life of their subject. And also we'll talk about student life and support. So hopefully we'll cover some of the key things when thinking about studying at Cambridge, and hopefully that will be really useful for you to learn more about the university and to be thinking about whether it's a good fit for you in terms of the teaching styles and things like that. So just to begin, you may have seen the first in the series of the international webinars, and Sam and Roshan, my colleagues, do cover this in a little bit more detail, but courses at Cambridge are called triposes. So that essentially is what we're referring to when you might see the term tripos used across the website or in undergraduate prospectuses. And so courses are typically called triposes, but it doesn't mean anything different. It's just kind of the Cambridge term for courses. But as I said, Sam and Roshan do cover some other Cambridge specific terms if you want to go and listen to those. We have about 30 courses on offer at Cambridge, and these cover about 65 subject areas. And you can see the pyramid on the slide there. And this really demonstrates the kind of the way that courses are structured at Cambridge typically. So usually you will cover a subject area quite broadly to begin with in your Cambridge course, and then as you go through you will begin to specialise and then really focus in towards the end of your degree programme if you choose to specialise in that way. So there are often a wide range of specialisms available, obviously depending on the course that you're looking to study, but that just gives you an idea of the typical structure. You do start fairly broadly, and then the idea is really that you become an expert in your specific field. It will vary between courses, but typically you will have more compulsory modules in your early years and then have more optional papers and more choice to design your course as you go through. But do kind of check this in reference to the specific course that you're looking at, because this does vary. Some courses will have more compulsory modules than others, definitely. But as a general rule of thumb, the number of courses and choices available to students does increase as you go through the years of study. So, and as I said, there's much more detail on course pages of our website. There are several courses that are unique to Cambridge. So we do have some courses that aren't really studied in the same way at many other universities. And so do go and have a look at those in a bit more detail. They might be courses that you're not directly familiar with from high school and things like that, but they might suit your interests and be a really interesting way to engage with your subject. So there are a number of courses that are unique to Cambridge and can only be studied here. In terms of a little bit more on our courses, exams are still the main form of assessment in most cases at Cambridge, but you can find out more about the other types of assessment and the forms of assessment on individual course pages. So do go ahead and look at those. And Many courses include a final research project or a dissertation, and we may get the students to touch on that in a little bit later in the presentation, but many courses do offer this opportunity for kind of an independent project as alongside the examinations. There is practical work that might be assessed in some science subjects, and again, more details can always be found on the course pages of our website. So once you've kind of identified the type of course you might want to study, do use those course pages to really go into depth and find out more about the specific modules on offer, the forms of assessment, and information like that. So the link is just there on the slide. Cambridge does offer a challenging and stimulating education. The courses that we have on offer are incredibly academically intensive, and this is partly due to the structure of the terms at Cambridge. So we have 3 lots of 8-week terms, and the students will talk more about their workload and how they fit everything in later in the presentation. But although we have a really academic intensive environment, we do create a really, what we hope to be a really supportive environment for our students. And kind of at the spearhead of this is the Director of Studies. A student is allocated when they enroll in Cambridge to oversee their academic progress. But this is alongside lots of other support through the college system and at the university level as well. Our teachers and lecturers, so people who are teaching the courses, are often national and even international experts in their field. Many of our courses are research-led courses. Cambridge is a member of the Russell Group universities, which are kind of research-intensive universities. And so a lot of the professors, the academics who will be teaching the courses are at the forefront of their own research. As I said, often national or international experts in their field, and that will be feeding into the teaching that is going on at the university. And to support the teaching as well as the support that's available, we do have a number of superb facilities and resources on access to students, and we will talk about more about those in a little while. So obviously the first part of any university application in the UK is to choose a course. And so I've talked a little bit about how the courses at Cambridge work and what a general kind of typical features of the courses are. But the next thing to do really is to think about what course you want to actually apply to. And so some general tips, think about what you enjoy. So you'll be studying this at a high level for at least 3 years. So it's really important that you're totally passionate and really interested in the course you're looking to apply to. As I've said, the courses might differ in terms of the modules available and the structure of assessment, things like that. So it's really important to look closely at course details and also to stay open-minded. I mentioned that some of the Cambridge courses are unique and may not have been studied at school, but might suit your interests in a really nice way. So do stay open-minded when you're looking and researching courses. Obviously, when you're choosing a course, you're choosing something that you're really passionate about, but you might want to consider, is there a particular career path that you want to follow that has specific requirements for qualifications or subjects that you're expected to have taken? And are there specific subject requirements for entry to the course? So many of our courses at Cambridge have subject-specific entry requirements, and so making sure that you're actually eligible for the course of your choice is really important. But at this point, I think I'll pass over to our students just to talk about maybe how you chose your course, guys, and what attracted you to the kind of Cambridge version of the course. So Madeline, I'll come to you first.
Okay, so as I've already said, I do social anthropology and religious studies, but I actually only swapped to that course this year. I actually applied to Cambridge to do theology. And the reason why I chose theology in the first place is because I did philosophy at school and I loved it. And I was sort of researching quite a lot of philosophy courses, and I sort of I felt that sort of my interest was more to do with the people, and I didn't necessarily get that from just doing straight philosophy. And I actually had a conversation with one of my friends who's told me to have a look at the theology course at Cambridge, and sort of the more I read about it, the more I realized that it was what I wanted to do. It was a lot more sort of people oriented and a lot more sort of focused on things that I was interested in. And also it provided me with quite a wide basis, and you didn't have to have done the subject before, which is I hadn't done specifically theology before. And then the course that I'm doing now is actually a new course that they've just started this year, and it appealed to me because the sort of social anthropology is again something that I'd never done before, and I sort of I have a couple of friends who do HSPS, which is sort of a lot. That's the department that this falls under. And the more I sort of spoke to them, the more interested I became. And again, it's got a real people focus. It is sort of the study of people and how people live and why they do what they do. And that's why I decided to change. And I love it. It's great.
Perfect. Thank you. And Hin?
Oh, yeah, as I mentioned, I'm doing a science course, and I was always like interested in like animals since I was like a kid. So I already knew that I wanted to do a course in science. And when I think about, what I think the Cambridge course is like really helpful, or like really friendly, is that you don't have to commit to a particular stream of science or like particular area in your first year, like unlike other courses in different other universities where you have to choose, oh, I want to do biochemistry in like the first year, even if you haven't had much like exposure to this area of science. But I think this course in Cambridge is really like the format of it is really friendly. So in the first year you get to choose 4 subjects from like a range of different topics, and you can actually basically mix and match and choose whatever you feel interested. You don't have to commit to any of it. And well, at first I thought I was interested in like evolution and behavior because that was what I was interested since I was like a kid. But then after studying for a year, I realized, oh, it might not be that suitable for me. Then I swapped to biochemistry. So from then onwards, even at second year, you get to choose from like a range of courses. So even at second year, you don't have to commit to anything. You really actually start to focus on a particular subject in your third year. So I think that's like a really huge advantage for this natural science course in Cambridge. And yeah, I think if you're generally interested in science, I think this is like a really nice course because you get to you get exposure like all different fields of science, and you don't have to commit to anything, and you can actually choose whatever you want to do. And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a really good point, Hin. So for anyone who is interested in kind of the science-based subjects, natural science is pretty much the way that all sciences are studied at Cambridge. And so do go away and have a look at the natural sciences programme if you are interested in those subject areas, and have a look at, as Hin was saying, like how it's structured with kind of more breadth, as I was saying, and then going into the slightly deeper specialisms as you go through. Great.
Can I just add an extra point?
Oh, go on, yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
No, you're fine.
Just in case someone is like interested in like both physical side and like the biological side, you don't have to worry about like choosing either biological or physical natural sciences, because you can actually do physics and biology at the same time. You just have to choose the name of your program at the start, but it doesn't restrict you to studying like, for example, I chose biological natural sciences. It doesn't mean that I can't take physics in the first year. So that is definitely not a restriction or a barrier to like force you to only do biology or physics. So yeah, that's it. Yeah. Just a side note, I guess.
Perfect. Thanks, Hin. Okay, let's just move on to a little bit of information about the different teaching styles. So some of these terms you're probably familiar with and others maybe less so, but these are the main teaching styles at Cambridge. So first of all, as you would expect at any kind of global university, we have lectures. And so this is the large group teaching. So historically, this is where you'd be sat in a large lecture theatre, but obviously for the pandemic and during the pandemic, these large lecture teaching has been moved online, but hopefully still really accessible for students, and actually potentially even a little bit more convenient, allowing students to watch in their own time and kind of pause and make notes and reflect and things on that. But lectures are obviously led by professors and used as a starting point and providing information for students to then go ahead and continue their own research and reading off the back of those. In terms of size, this will depend on the course that you're studying, on how many students are in your lectures, whether that's physically or virtually. But it can be up to several hundred students for the larger courses. And in terms of duration, these are about 50 minutes, so just under the hour, and yeah, last around 50 minutes. So the next type of teaching that we have at Cambridge, and that you can expect to, again, probably most universities around the world, are seminars or kind of classroom teaching. So this is obviously much smaller groups than the lectures. This is still facilitated by academics, but students are expected to contribute much more actively to these. And so this is your opportunity to discuss particular topics in more details and kind of have that or begin that academic dialogue. In terms of size, these are probably between kind of 10 and 30 students. Obviously, this will vary depending on the course. And in terms of length, these are probably around 1 to 2 hours long. Then, if you're doing a science-based subject, more likely that you'll have practicals. And these are essentially laboratory classes where you'll undertake experiments and things like that. And maybe Hin will touch more on that when he talks about his typical day. In terms of the size, these will vary depending on the lab capacity and things. And again, the duration will vary depending on kind of what you're doing in that particular course. One thing that is then very unique to Cambridge is our supervision teaching. And this is kind of the final element, but probably one of the most central elements to the Cambridge kind of learning environment. And this is our system of personal tuition. So these are pretty unique to Cambridge, and we'll talk more about those on the next slide. But essentially, it's your opportunity to explore your subject in more depth, feeding off the work that you're doing for your lectures, your seminars, and your practicals. Because this is the kind of system of personal tuition, it does mean that the size of the groups are very much smaller, so between 1 and 3 students. So supervisions can be kind of one-on-one learning with professors, or it can be professors with small groups of students up to maybe 3, depending on the class size. And these last about 1 hour. Again, but we will talk much more in depth about the supervision system because it is an element of the teaching at Cambridge that people are perhaps less familiar with, and so I think our students will hopefully help us to understand what supervisions really are and how important they are to the Cambridge experience. So I will just do a bit of a recap of and kind of an overview of what the supervisions, the kind of central features of the supervision. And then I'll pass over to the students to talk a little bit about a typical supervision and how they find supervisions. So as I've said, this is our system of personal tuition, and they are really unique to Oxford and Cambridge. So students have the opportunity to have really high quality contact time. At Oxford, they're called tutorials. At Cambridge, they're called supervisions. This is really access to academics weekly or fortnightly, and is a really unique opportunity to get that kind of one-on-one or one-on small group teaching from experts in their field. Supervisions provide students with the opportunity to explore the subject more deeply. So the opportunity arises that you can discuss your subject in lots more detail from what you've learned in the lectures and the seminars. It also allows you to discuss your own work and ideas in a space where you're able to get that kind of level of feedback. So you obviously will receive kind of verbal feedback on any ideas or work that you discuss, but also students will typically prepare work and receive kind of more formal feedback on that as well. So this means that the supervision system really creates the ideal environment for a student to develop their thinking skills, and provides an environment for students to test out their kind of ideas before committing them to their more formal essays or exam answers. Whilst you get feedback from your supervisors, supervisions aren't assessed. So this really does just kind of emphasizes how this creates the space for a really kind of fluid discussion and kind of learning experience, rather than having that assessment during those sessions. In terms of the feedback that you get, this will likely be on work that you have prepared in advance, that you then take with you or send to your supervisors. And this obviously depends on the subject as to what this will be, but it might be reading in preparation, it might be writing an essay, or it might be working on some problems, depending on obviously what subject you do, and maybe the students can talk a little bit about the type of preparation they might do ahead of a supervision. And as I've touched on when talking about kind of the professors, the academics who are teaching on our courses, supervisors are also specialists in a particular subject or field of whatever you're studying kind of in that moment. So that will, the person who is supervising you will change depending on the subject area that you are having your supervisions on at that time, but they will be experts in their field. So again, a really kind of useful resource to bounce off someone who really knows their stuff in their subject. And supervisions might be in your college, they might be in another college where your college has organised for you to visit an expert at another college, or sometimes they might be held in the faculties for the smaller subjects. So that is kind of a brief overview of supervisions, but I will now pass over to the students to describe a typical supervision and just touch on any of the things that we've covered. So guys, I'll pass over to you just to talk through a little bit about supervisions.
I can go first. So for both my subjects, I have supervisions, but they're in sort of different departments. So I actually have two DOSs because I'm doing a joint track. So my DOS for theology will organise, sort of put me in touch with my supervisors for theology, and the same with social anthropology. Last year I did 4 papers that were supervised, which meant that I had 2 sort of sets of supervisions per term, which is about 6 supervisions in total. So I was doing 12 face-to-face sort of supervisions per term. And for each of those supervisions, what you typically have to do is they'll set you an essay and you read the essay in the week. So they'll also give you a reading list normally, or sometimes they'll sort of use the lecturer's reading lists as well. And you sort of read through those and you start to sort of develop your own ideas, and then you write an essay in response to what they've set you. And then the great thing about supervisions is when you go to them. So mine last year, it was either me and the supervisor, or me and one other person and the supervisor. And what's great is you sort of start off by going over the essay and sort of going over any points that you might have found a bit tricky. And it gives you a really good chance to sort of speak to the supervisor, again, someone who really knows what they're talking about and sort of been studying this for a really long time, and sort of see things from potentially different perspectives. By having it with someone else who's also a student, you can listen to their ideas and it's sort of a lot of, oh, I hadn't really thought of it like that before, or things like that. And sort of that you don't necessarily get a mark on your essays. Some of my supervisors decided to sort of give us a mark, but it doesn't contribute to your grade or anything. It's just sort of to see where you're at. And then you get a report at the end of the term where they just sort of give you some feedback. And then what's quite useful is when you're revising, you also get a sort of revision supervision with each of your supervisors. So if you had any questions that are sort of built up over the year with the rest of your sort of lectures or that have arisen from sort of revision, the supervisor is still there for you to contact with, and you sort of have a relationship with them, which means that you can ask them questions that you might not necessarily be able to ask a lecturer. And I think just quickly to sort of touch on the seminars, I've had seminars this year as well for social anthropology, and because it's quite a small group of us, we don't actually get supervised in those papers, so we don't have to write any essays for those seminar papers. But because it's sort of a slightly similar situation, because there's so few of us, we all sort of discuss our ideas. We actually give a presentation. So I've given 3 presentations over the course of this year for that seminar, which sort of gives me an opportunity still to read around the subject and still to sort of engage with other people and discuss my ideas, but in a slightly different setting. Yeah.
That's really useful. Thank you, Madeline. Hin, I guess on the science side, supervisions might be a little bit different in terms of the preparation you do and the work that you do, but yeah, a little bit about your supervisions. You've obviously been a final year, have had probably quite a few over the years, so interested to hear about those.
Yeah, so for me, in the first year, I did 4 different subjects. So we had like 1 supervision per week per subject. So basically, I have 4 supervisions per week, and each of them, as mentioned, they're like 1 hour long. And the preparation work kind of differs from subject to subject. So maybe for like chemistry and maths, we kind of have to do problem sheets, and you just submit them perhaps in advance, or you just take the answers to the session and you just discuss with your supervisor. For like biology, maybe you just have to do some short answer questions or just write an essay. But basically, you do have enough time to prepare for it. And even though if you can't finish the work, you can tell your supervisor that you tried your best and you can't figure out what the answer is. And I'm sure they won't be mad at you because you've tried your best. Yeah, and one thing that I found the supervisions like, because some of these subjects maybe, as mentioned in the slide, the supervisors might not be from your college, so they might be from other colleges, just simply because that your college doesn't have a specialist or someone who is knowledgeable in that area. So sometimes it could be like a really good opportunity to meet people from other colleges who do the same subject. But yeah, that might happen. So that was quite interesting. That was an interesting way to like know other people to do the same subject. And yeah, basically, I think that's it for me. I think the general framework for supervisions are like quite similar. It's just the type of questions or preparation work that are slightly different between different subjects. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess what I will just mention is that the supervision style is kind of the inspiration for the interview at Cambridge. So the interview is really there to test how well a student is suited to the supervision style of learning that we have. So the type of things that we're talking about here and that you're hearing the students talk about in terms of that discussion, that really is kind of a feature of the interview because they are inspired by this kind of supervision. So that academic discussion is really key within the application process because it is such a central part of the kind of learning at Cambridge. So yeah, I just thought I would touch on that. But I think now let's hand over. Oh no, one more slide, and then we'll get to the typical day. In addition to kind of the central features of the learning at Cambridge, so the lectures, the seminars, the supervisions, there are some additional course features that will obviously depend on the course that you're studying, but there might be opportunity for field trips, study visits, maybe even study abroad in a really small number of our courses. So obviously have a look for more detail on our course page, but Hind, did you say that you did a field trip as part of your program a couple of years ago?
Yeah, so basically for the first year course in evolution and behavior, we get to, there's like a optional trip during I think it was the Easter holiday, where we could pick on that we could join like a 1 week trip to somewhere else in the UK, and it would be like a trip to basically somewhere. I remembered I went to like the southwest side of UK, and we did kind of like a 1 week trip where we looked at the animal diversity in the area, and we visited greenhouse in those areas, and it was just a really fun experience to meet people and who have like shared the same interests as you. And I do remember there's like a second year course where if you choose to study plants, I remember some people saying that they went to Portugal for like a field trip. So it really depends on like what your interests are, and maybe there are field trips that you might sign up to.
Yeah, definitely. So if on the course pages, there might be a little bit of information about the kind of opportunities for trips depending on the course. And if you're visiting kind of college websites or department websites, and there might be some information about funding that is available from those sources that provide kind of the opportunities for students to undertake those probably in the vacation periods. So that won't be across all our courses, but definitely have a look on the courses that you're interested in to see if it's a feature. As we kind of touched on in when we were talking about the opportunity for independent research projects and dissertations, there are obviously some opportunities for this in certain courses. Obviously, the extent to which will vary, but if that's something that you're interested in, it's definitely worth looking into to what extent your course allows you to carry out your own research and put those ideas forward in kind of some kind of thesis or something towards the end of your time at university. And also work experience might be a feature, so it is an inbuilt feature into a few of our courses just because of the nature of the programs. But even if it's not included on a course, then many of our students do find work experience in the vacation periods through the Careers Service. So do visit the Careers Service website if you want to know a little bit more about those services. But that is something that many of our students, especially because of the term structure, that does leave more time in the vacation periods to undertake work experience if a student chooses to. Madeline or Hind, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that slide?
Not much. I guess I'll touch on the research later on.
Just about sort of work experience and the career service, I have used the career service to sort of ask them questions. They have a really good system whereby you can sort of get in touch with them and ask sort of someone who's sort of a specialist in one of the a specific sort of career, and you can just sort of ask them a couple of questions about the different things you're thinking of applying to, and they're really helpful at sort of pointing you in the right direction. They've got sort of lots of online resources that can help you with sort of like interview stuff and with all sorts of things that you might come across in any application. And yeah, they're really helpful and really there to help you, which I think is quite.
No, definitely, they're a fantastic resource that students have access to kind of from the moment they enroll. Students don't need to leave it till kind of they're graduating to engage with those, as Madeline's obviously shown. So yeah, they're a really good resource, and students actually have lifelong access to the career service once they graduate from Cambridge. So that's also a real benefit of the services at the university. Okay, let's move on to talking a bit about workload. So obviously Cambridge is a really rigorous academic environment, and so prospective students might have questions about is the workload a lot and what does the workload look like? So I'll just talk a little bit about the workload, and then we'll pass over to our students to get their kind of first-hand insight. So as we've said already, we do have short terms, so there is a lot to fit in at Cambridge, and that means that there is from kind of the school setting, an increase in the pace of work and also in the volume of work that students are expected to do. So it definitely is a step up in terms of what we're expecting our students to do. And in UK universities in general, there is an emphasis on independent study and self-directed study. So obviously, depending on your course, you will have what we call contact hours, which are the time spent in lectures, in seminars, in supervisions. But there will also be a lot of time where students are expected to dedicate their own independent time to studying. And this, I guess, is represented in the fact that an average workload in terms of hours is typically between kind of 42 and 46 hours per week. So in term times, it is lots to do, but I think our students will hopefully talk about their typical days and show how that is manageable for students if you find the right kind of balance. And because obviously the terms are shorter, there might be reading or research or revision for students to undertake during those vacation times. Obviously, with those being quite long, hopefully there's time to find a balance. But Madeline and Hin, if you could just talk briefly about your experience of the kind of Cambridge workload. I know we'll touch on kind of your typical days in a moment, but any tips that you have for kind of managing that, or how have you found it so far?
I think it could be quite scary at the start, where you have to like submit work every week to your supervisor, and they might be like really critical of your work, especially when you're in like a really small group setting. And yeah, that might be really scary at the start. But as we mentioned, the supervisions are mainly like as in they're in like a discussion format, so they're not here to like criticize your work or to make you feel bad. They're trying to help you improve. And a lot of times, if you don't understand stuff, you can really ask your supervisors, and I'm sure they're really happy and willing to answer your questions. And I think I mentioned that maybe somewhere at the start. Even if you can't finish the work, you can just tell your supervisors that, okay, I've kind of hit like a block that I literally can't figure out the answer to any of this, or I'm just too tired, or I'm being a bit like busy this week and I can't finish all the questions. A lot of time the supervisors are actually like really, they understand this because, well, you've got other subjects to do and you have to like manage all of them. And I think one really useful tip is that you don't have to force yourself to like complete everything. Even though if you can't finish it, you can just tell your supervisor and it's absolutely fine. And I think that is really useful, especially in the first year where you feel like you have to complete everything. You have to like do everything until it's like really perfect because everyone's like really good like around you. But I think, yeah, you don't have to like put pressure on yourself.
Yeah, I just sort of something I sort of want to say is that obviously the supervisors, they're also doing their own research and they've got a lot of their own deadlines to meet as well. And while it is obviously a lot of work when you've got to do your supervisions and things, they know that they've got their own deadlines as well. So they do understand what you're sort of going through to a certain extent. So they are really quite reasonable about things. I would say that when it first sort of kicks off in your first term, it is a bit daunting. Like I remember getting my first essay sort of in my first week. I was like, wow, it was sort of right from sort of the get-go. It really started. But I think there is quite a big difference between sciences and between humanities subjects in terms of the sort of lectures, because I have one lecture a week for each of my courses, which means that I've got 4 lectures a week. But what that means is that I'm expected to spend a lot more time doing independent reading for those lectures, because they expect us to have some knowledge when we're going into them, and also they're not on top of that doing reading for essays. And I'm not sure about what it is for science subjects, but I think I'm not sure how much pre-lecture reading there is in the same way. I don't know if Hin could say something about that, but
yeah, no, in like the first 2 years, I guess it's more like an introduction to the university level of science. So they generally expect like less reading on yourself. But once you go on to like your third year and fourth year, obviously you're specializing in like a certain area of science, so they would expect more reading once you're like advanced to those stages. But yeah, as Madeline mentioned, in like the first 2 years, we have like more contact hours in the lab, so they would obviously expect like less reading because you spend most of your time, most of your days in the lab, and they do realize that you can't just like spend the entire night like reading extra material.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that leads us well into you guys talking about your typical days. First off, I will just quickly touch on the facilities and the resources that we have at the university. So we have over 100 libraries at Cambridge, and this is because we have college libraries, we also have department and faculty libraries, and then we have the main university library, which is pictured on the slide there. Across the university and departments and colleges, there are also plenty of kind of IT facilities for students to access. We also have a language centre where students can access academic support, academic English support, but also might choose to enrol in taught courses in their kind of spare time if it's kind of an outside interest. Then we also have the museums and collections that mean we have 9 specialist museums across the university, and students in kind of subjects relating to the museum collections will probably spend a lot of time engaging with those and have unique access to those, and it's really interesting that they have them kind of on their doorstep in Cambridge. So those are a bit about the facilities and resources, but you can find out plenty more about the different things we have available for students on our website. But I will now pass over to Hin first of all to talk about a typical day for natural sciences in the first year, and then we'll move on to the third year.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, like in the first year and the second year, it's mostly an introduction to university level of science. So basically in the first year, you get to choose 3 science-based subjects and 1 math subject. And in the second year, you get to choose 3 subjects. So basically in the first, they basically are quite similar. So I'll just talk about the first year. So basically in like a typical week, in the mornings, you would have generally 2 hours of lectures every day. They usually span from Monday to Friday, and for some subjects, you have lectures on Saturday mornings as well. So as mentioned, you do 4 different subjects in the first year, and the size of the lecture would span from around like 40 to 100-ish students, depending on what type of subjects you choose. And basically, that's it for the morning. And usually in the afternoon, which is typically around like 11, it usually starts from like around 11 until 5 p.m. They're mostly practical lab sessions, like we mentioned at the start of the session, where you do experiments in the lab, and they usually have like 1 lab session every week for each of your subjects. So if you do like 4 subjects in the first year, obviously you would have 4 different lab sessions each week, and some of them are actually run like every 2 weeks. So you probably should like check online to see whether like the frequency or duration of your lab session. But they usually, for example, for chemistry labs, you could be synthesizing compounds or just carrying out reactions. For biology labs, you could be synthesizing proteins or just carrying out typical experiments that you've learned during the lectures. For math session, you might think, oh, how can you have like a lab session for maths? Well, apparently they can. They're going to provide you with like basic introduction to coding, which actually proves to be very useful in your later stages of your study, because you have to process all these data in science, and obviously learning how to code during first year was actually really helpful. So basically that is the whole day for like, because it lasts usually until like 4 or 5 p.m. So that would be your entire day. And usually in the evenings, I would sometimes spend time with my friends, like having dinner together. You could cook in college, or just maybe even attend formal dinners, but obviously you have to allocate time for like preparing for your supervisions. For these could include like writing essays or like completing your worksheets, and obviously you have to balance between spending your free time as well as doing work. And sometimes I could also like head out and attend talks by societies. So it doesn't have to be restricted in your college. You can join university-wide events. And sometimes if I'm like too bored, I'll just head to the movie theaters on my own. And yeah, just a quick note on the supervisions, because as I mentioned, you basically spend your whole day attending lectures as well as spending time in the lab. So basically the timings on the supervisions can be quite flexible. So these could be in the evenings. So I had some supervisions at 4 p.m. or even at 9 p.m. simply because you have to match the timetables of your supervisor as well as your daily schedules. Or sometimes it could be like during lunchtimes, right between the lecture sessions and the lab sessions, or even on Saturdays, simply because of the mentioned tight schedule. So it can be quite hectic during the first few weeks because you have so many subjects and so many like sessions that you have to go to, but you'll get a hang of it, and eventually people just start to forget how busy they are, and we actually do generally enjoy like the schedule and like how much stuff you learn and the people that you meet during the lectures. So that's basically for the first year.
Yeah, and then we'll move on to next slide. There you go.
Right. Yeah, so basically in the third year and fourth year, just in case someone wants to do like a fourth year course, you actually specialize in a particular subject, and in my case, I do biochemistry. So compared to like first year, you don't have to do all these different subjects. So you actually have 1 to 2 hours of lectures every day. And finally, you don't have lectures on Saturdays anymore. So that's a good thing. Basically, it's a module based, and you have way fewer students, in this case, around 30 to 40 students in your lectures. And during Michaelmas term, which is from October to December, in the afternoons, basically you have nothing to do. You sometimes have to attend occasional scientific method session or just simply Q&A sessions with the lecturers after their lectures. And basically that's it. You have to do your own reading, you have to study on your own. You can actually do whatever you want. You can join events such as the university ambassador events, which is what I'm doing right now. And actually you can enjoy time to there's more time to yourself. So you can do whatever you want, but obviously you have to remember there's the exams at the end of the year, and obviously you have to remember that. But during Lent term, where this is where the fun begins, where you actually undertake like a 2-month research project. So basically during Lent term, which is from January to March, you actually spend the entire afternoon working in the lab for your research project. And I think that is the highlight of my third year studies, because that is when you actually do experiments in the lab rather than the practical sessions you did in first year and second year, where people tell you what you should do and you have to follow all the protocols. In third year, you actually design your own experiments, and you just search for answers for answers for scientific questions, which was really fun. So yeah, similarly to first year, you typically end your day around 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. where you leave the lab, and similarly, you could go out and meet friends, play sports together, have dinner with them. So I would say for a typical, student who's doing science, you would spend most of your time in the day either in the lab or doing self-studying. Then probably you have some free time in the evening to spend with your friends or do whatever you want. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that overview, Hin. That's been really useful to see how much time science students spend kind of in the lecture theatres and in the labs. Madeline, I'll pass over to you now for the kind of social anthropology and religious studies side of things.
Yeah, so my lectures are normally an hour long, which is what we've sort of already spoken about, and they start as early as 9 a.m. So sometimes they start later, sometimes they start at 9. Because my college is quite a long way away, I have to cycle in the mornings, which means that I have to get up quite a bit earlier. So normally I'm up at about 8 a.m. in order to have time to have breakfast and things. And then so I'll do my lectures in the morning, and then my faculty, because it's quite small, something that's quite nice about it is we have a faculty tea break every day at 11 a.m. And this is a really good opportunity to sort of speak to your lecturers, speak to other people who do your course in different years. Other people sort of gather in this sort of a communal space, and everyone can just chat and ask any questions or get to know different people. So that's something that's really nice. Normally after that, I'll go to the library for a bit until lunchtime because my college is far away. I don't necessarily want to be cycling backwards and forwards because that, if I did it more than once in a day, it'd probably take up about an hour of my time. And then there's lots of places that you can actually eat on Cedric site, which is where my faculty is. So unless I was specifically going back to college, I'd probably just stay on Cedric. And then in the afternoon, I would normally go back to the faculty and work in the library. I'm not so good at working in my room, so I really try and make the most of the faculty library. And also it's quite a nice place to be able to work with different people who are also doing your course, and also you've got the access to the sort of library that is specific to your course, which means you've got all the books there. I also play sport for the university, so if it was a Wednesday or some of the different days of the week, I might have training in the afternoon, so I'd either head to the university sports pitches or go to the bus to go away for a match. And as I've already said, if I had a supervision, I would go to this. They're normally in the afternoon for me. And sometimes they've been in other colleges, sometimes they've been on the faculty. It really depends on what the sort of timetable of the supervisor is and what they're doing. The library, the sort of department library closes at 6 p.m. every evening. So that's normally when I sort of shut my books. And unless I've got something really important that I need to be doing for the next day or for a deadline that's approaching, I'll normally sort of do something fun with my evening, whether that's sort of cooking dinner. Sometimes I do have training at that time, so that might be 2 hours long, which means that I have a bit of a later dinner. Could have to sort of meal with friends, go and see friends, or just sort of watch a film or see what Cambridge has to offer. There's sort of a lot of fun things. And yeah, I think just want to reiterate that doing non-academic things I think is really important. It's something that I think there are opportunities to do it. I don't know. It's important to remember that you can take time to yourself and there is life beyond the work. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that leads us really nicely into a little chat about student life. And as Hin and Madeline have both said, obviously, while kind of academics is a big part of Cambridge life, it's not just restricted to the lecture theatres and the library. There is lots on offer outside, and students are generally very good at carving out that time to engage in things beyond their subjects and their lectures. We have hundreds of university and college level societies. We have the Cambridge Students' Union, so you can check out the societies directory on their website to see the many different societies we have available. We'll talk to Hin and Madeline now for a little bit, but also if you want to kind of hear from current students in other ways after the webinar, then we have our UniBuddy platform on our undergraduate study website, which offers the opportunity to chat to current undergraduates about any questions you have about the university student life. So that's under the Chat to Our Students tab on our undergraduate study website. So do visit that and start talking to some students if you are interested in hearing from them. And we also have something called Inside University, which Inside Uni do videos and accounts of, it's kind of run by current students to really inform and kind of share experiences, and they have a lot of videos specifically for international students about living and studying at Cambridge from a particular background and things like that. So definitely visit their website, as it's a really useful resource. But Madeline and Hin, maybe you could just walk us through kind of one club or society or something in Cambridge that outside of the university that you really like doing in your free time, and just talk a little bit about student life kind of within the university and beyond.
Yeah, so I play lacrosse for the university, and for that it's actually it's got quite a big time commitment, so I actually train for it about 4 times a week, and I have a match on most Wednesdays, so that's about sort of 5 times a week that I'll be doing lacrosse related things. On top of that, there's also the opportunity this year. I'm actually on the lacrosse committee, which means that I'm actually the social secretary, which means that I'm responsible for sort of organising events where people get to meet each other from other societies, which is really, really fun. Something that I love about lacrosse is obviously it's an opportunity to sort of run around, get outside, sort of have some fresh air, which I think is important. But also it sort of gives you it's given me a group of friends beyond my college who sort of enjoy the same things as me. And it's quite nice to sort of have a couple of different groups you can see for different things and sort of rely on for different things as well. Also, but I think you don't have sort of sport related things. You don't have to be playing sport for the university if you do want to get involved in sport. Most colleges have different sport sort of groups. Like my college has college lacrosse, it's got college netball, all sorts of different things. And I also do sort of some volunteering, which for an organisation called Students Supporting Street Kids, and I'm their events coordinator. So I've organised 2 fundraisers sort of over my time at Cambridge so far, and I'm looking forward to continuing with this until sort of into next year as well.
Sounds really good. Thanks, Madeline. Hin, what about you?
Well, for me, unlike some of my friends who do rowing and they can wake up at like 4 a.m. in the morning, I can't do that. So basically, I join sports which have less commitment that are required. So basically, as I've mentioned, like I don't really have much time during the weekdays. So on the weekends, I actually go to the gymnastics club because I've done gymnastics for like 7 to 8 years during like when I was younger, and I really wanted to pick it up during university. So they actually have like a gymnastics session every Sunday, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be like a professional to go there. You can just simply go there and meet different people and do like stretches and different stuff. Simply, maybe you just want like a 2-hour session every week, simply doing sports. So I think that was really nice, and you get to know people from other colleges in different years and different subjects. So that was a really nice opportunity to know people like outside of your college. And I think another thing that a lot of students always mention about is you don't have to be stuck in Cambridge. You can actually head to London maybe like during weekends or something like that, because it's only like a 1-hour train to London. So you can always head there, and maybe if you have friends that are studying there, you can always go there and meet up with them like over the weekends. And I think that's a really good way to get out of the city if sometimes you feel really exhausted or tired, like studying during like midterm or something like that. And yeah.
Yeah, definitely. For international students who want to kind of explore a little bit further afield, we are really close to London and Cambridge, and also other parts of the UK as well. So yeah, that's a really good insight, but lots on offer, as Hin and Madeline have both demonstrated, plenty of opportunities to kind of do things quite casually outside of class, or a bit more kind of formally with the kind of bigger sporting commitments and stuff. So thanks both for sharing those with us.
Just one more quick thing, if that's
go ahead.
As well as sort of researching in the society's sort of directory before you come, at the beginning of every year there is actually an events fair, which I went to in first year, and honestly the number of sort of clubs and societies that were present, like there were things that I'd never heard of before in my life, which looked sort of so interesting. And so I think that while that you can look at things that you've already done or things that you might want to start that you already know of, that sort of event fair is a great way to sort of, I think, firstly speak to the people who are running these societies like face to face directly in normal times, obviously, and learn more about different things that you sort of have never heard of before. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in the kind of pandemic times, I think that has been happening virtually. So still being able to kind of access that information, and often groups will run kind of taster sessions at the beginning of each year. So even if you don't have to kind of fully commit, you can just kind of try out a few different things that sound interesting to you. So yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks, Madeline. We have touched on the kind of supportive elements of Cambridge quite a bit throughout the session, but obviously the transition between kind of studying at high school and studying at Cambridge can be a bit of a challenge for students, and so the university is always there to support students through any kind of hardships or worries they have. You can visit our undergraduate website for kind of full details on the types of support that's available. Obviously, through the college system, there is tons of support. We've spoken about the Director of Studies. Students are also allocated a personal tutor, but we also have things, so as well as the careers service, we have a counselling service, we have a disability resource centre, so many different elements and branches of the university really looking out for student welfare and supporting students through any transition. But guys, maybe you could just touch on briefly how, I know you've kind of spoken about that transition being kind of potentially a bit of a shock to the system initially, but any more comments you have about the kind of differences between kind of high school and Cambridge, and whether you have any kind of parting tips for any new students who are maybe approaching that kind of transition shortly?
Well, personally, I'm like obviously you can tell I'm an overseas student from Hong Kong, and when I first came here, it was really like the environment was really like unfamiliar, and I don't really know like many people also from Hong Kong who do like the same subject, so it was quite difficult at the start. But I think one like tip that I would give was I found the college tutor like really useful. You can actually, so the tutor is like a point of contact in your college who is usually like a professor who is not doing your own subject, so they actually can like talk to you like without, you don't have to worry about like academics or stuff like that. You can basically treat them as like as a friend, and you can like talk to them about your worries or like what you are like working on right now. And I found this was like really helpful to have like a start of term and like end of term chat, and you can basically tell them if you're having like any worries or what are you going through, and they usually give you like really good advice on like if they can't solve your problem, they could direct you to other people who might be who might give you support, such as your Director of Studies or other like places that Amy have mentioned in the university. So I think that's like, if you don't know where you should start, like who you should contact, I think the tutor in your college would be like a good place to start off with, because they know all the places and all the people that you should be in touch with if you have any issues. So I think, yeah, that would be my tip.
Absolutely,
yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, also completely reiterate, like your tutor is a great point of call when you sort of, if you want to talk to someone about things. I think also, as we've sort of both mentioned throughout, like it's a big transition to sort of self-learning. You're the one that's sort of in regulating the work that you're doing, which I think is a huge difference. And I guess a tip for that is like really set your own deadlines, because obviously your supervisors or your sort of lecturers, they're going to set their deadlines, but if I find it, I'm not necessarily the most organized person, so I find it really helpful to set my own deadlines and sort of write lists of the things that I have to do, and on the days that I have to get them done. And I find that that's a really good way to sort of manage my time and make sure that I am sort of staying on top of things and making sure to sort of find that balance. And I also think one more general tip is just do get stuck into everything. Like, you're only going to have your short amount of time at Cambridge, and I think we've both said the number of things that sort of are available to you. Well, we've all said the number of things that are available to you at Cambridge is, I mean, it's pretty unique, and while you're there, you might as well sort of do as much as you can, sort of reasonably manage. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are both really good tips. Thank you. And if you want to kind of learn more about the support systems and the things available to international students, I would recommend watching the first kind of instalment of the international webinar series, because Sam and Roshan talk in a bit more depth about the student support available and kind of the International Welcome Week and things like that that are available to kind of help ease the transition for international students. So yeah, do go ahead and watch that if you want to hear more and haven't already. Thank you both for your contributions there. So that pretty much brings us to the end of the session. As I've said, we do have our Cambridge Explained webinar. This will also be appearing on the international events page, where you can find out more about the different types of virtual events at the moment that we are participating in. Those are listed in kind of under various regions, but we also have some more general kind of subject spotlight sessions coming up as part of the international offering. So do just use the events web page on our undergraduate study website to find out where you can engage with us and our team more. But I think that's it in terms of the Studying at Cambridge information. Thank you so much to Hin and Madeline for their time today. It's been really useful hearing directly from you guys about how you find the different elements of the teaching at Cambridge and kind of all the tips that you've given for prospective students. So we really appreciate you kind of giving up your time today. If anyone has any questions, as well as using our undergraduate study website as a really useful resource, you can also reach the team at internationaladmissions@admin.cam.ac.uk. And like I said, there's also the UniBuddy function where you can chat to current students, and you can also reach out to the relevant staff members for your region there as well. So do make use of those resources that we've covered. I think that leaves me to just say thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Hin and Madeline once again, and thanks for joining us. We'll see you at the next session in the spring. So thanks so much. Take care, everyone. Thanks both.